In many Asian countries, there's this tradition. It's very common for Asian houses to have multiple generations living in the same household. We get a lot of flack from that from many Westerners. They say that it's not healthy. You're too dependent with each other. You're not promoting dependence and stuff. And I always say, well, the same way your tradition of having people move out, having your children move out of your house as soon as they hit 18, it doesn't always work. Not every 18 years old is mature enough to live it on their own, but you continue to do it anyway. And that is because that's what you believe in. This is what works for you. The same thing for us. It doesn't always work. Our tradition of having multiple generations in one household doesn't always work, but we continue doing it because in many instances it actually works. This is how we prefer it. We're happy. This is cultural. And so nothing is absolute. Our system and our tradition is not perfect, so yours isn't either. So don't judge us. And then the second thing is that there are 48 countries. Last that I counted, there are 48 countries in Asia. Each country has different cultures, multiple languages, different histories. So we're not a monolith. You can't provide, there's no one ultimate explanation in all of this. But I do know this, that in many forums that I've been to and many online discussions, people always say that it's because Asia is poor. And so Asians continue to live in one household because we don't have the financial capacity to support ourselves. So this is where the miseducation is coming from. Japan is a rich country, but it's still very common to find households where there are multiple generations living together. So it's not just about poverty or the economic status of a country. It's more about tradition and history and our culture. Okay, so before I continue, let me make it clear again that there are many Asian countries. Many Asian countries have multiple cultures, multiple languages, and different kind of history. But I know that in many Asian countries, we share something in common, that we have a very strong bond with our community and with our families. It doesn't have the same substance, should I say, or each country has a different dimension to it. But many Asian countries, not all, but many Asian countries have a very strong bond with their community and with their families, and that's why we continue this practice of having multiple generations live together. Our attachment it may be different in nature. There you go. That's the word that I'm looking for. Our practice of living together in one household, it may be different in its nature, but it has some similarities, and it's strongly influenced by our history and our culture and our experience. Now, as I've said, every country has their own dimension to it. And so I will try to go through all the Asian countries that I could get my hands on. But for now, I will discuss two countries. One is in the Philippines. We have a practice called bayanihan. This is when people come together to help somebody in need. So the most common expression of that is when a house is carried from one place to another. Yep. Our old houses, the traditional houses, they were actually, you can move it from one place to another. So those tiny houses that you see on YouTube, that's nothing for us. We've been practicing that for thousands and thousands of years. So our houses were actually made of bamboo and nipa and other materials you can just see in the forest. And so they would put it together, but you can move it from one place to another. So when somebody needs to move, you call on the community to help. They carry the house from one place to another. And that has resulted to other things, because once the job is done and the house was already transferred and everybody come together for a meal, they talk, they help the family that just moved for whatever else it is that they need. The bayanihan is the root word came from the word bayani or hero, and the connotation is that anybody can be a hero. You don't need to be Megatron or Lex Luthor to become a hero. You just need to be there for somebody that is your friend or your neighbor who's in need. That's all it takes to be a hero. Now, that has been carried on even in the modern times. We have Efren. Hi, Efren, if you're watching. He has a kariton school or a cart school. What he does is that he would he would go to different communities, pushing his cart filled with books, different materials, snacks for kids. And he would either teach kids who are not in school or supplement the learnings they have in school. That he would teach them how to read, write, mathematics, and other things. And the effort is to, and so he started it all by himself, and eventually other people joined in. They adapted their own and did it for their own community. He won the CNN Person of the Year or something. Now, the other demonstration of that is the people power. People power, or the EDSA revolution in the Philippines, is the first known Asian revolution, the first peaceful, successful Asian revolution. And so we actually did it 3 times. Just to prove that it wasn't a fluke the first time. So we had a president who was a dictator, and he was in office for more than 20 years. The entire country got pissed off, and so we came together, went to the streets. So we had like a freeway we called EDSA, and we went there. The entire country went there, protested until the president moved out of the office. Our version of White House is called Malacanang. So until he was physically carried out of Malacanang. And then we did it second time again, because we just wanted to make sure that it wasn't a fluke. Did it again. No, the second president we ousted was corrupt. Third was corrupt, and so we ousted him as well. And then that even the most current example would be the community pantry during the COVID-19. There was one woman who decided, okay, there are a lot of people who lost their jobs. They don't have money to buy food for themselves or for their family. So what she did was put a pantry outside her house, and anything she has an excess of food, any kind of supply, she would put it there, and everyone or anyone is actually free to get whatever it is that they need. All she asked is for others to contribute. Like if you're within sight, within the community, and you have excess as well, can you add something to it? And also for those who are going to get their supplies, she requested that they just get enough, so that the others who might need it will have enough to get it as well. Will have some for themselves as well. So just don't get anything that is in excess of what you need. And then the cafes and other businesses and restaurants in the Philippines actually adapted the same thing. And so they provided free coffee and free snacks to our frontliners. And so that's a proof that the Bayanihan spirit is still alive in the Philippines. So because of, as I've said, in the old times, whenever the community would come together to help somebody, it resulted into togetherness. So they would spend time together to just be friends, and it has been carried on to this day in the Philippines. In the West, it's very common for you to not know your neighbor. Give them space, give them their privacy. In the Philippines, you move into the community, you're a part of the family. So we get to know our neighbors, and there's always an effort to make them to assure them that if they need help, just call, and people are going to be there to help you. And even if it's not a time of need, if it's a lazy afternoon, you're not doing anything, you call your neighbors to spend time together and try to become friends. That's very common in the Philippines. Now, does it have its disadvantages? Of course, the same way not knowing your neighbors and giving your neighbors too much space, that has its disadvantage. It's very common, not very common, but you've heard of cases in America where there's a kidnapped girl who's been held captive for 19 years just in the backyard. No one knew about it because you don't care, because you're supposed to give them space. You're supposed to. So it has its bad effect, it has its advantages, and it has its disadvantages. In Japan, they have their own version of Bayanihan, which is called wa, but it has a different dimension to it. Wa, the translation to that is harmony. They produce, it implies a peaceful unity and conformity within a social group in which members prefer the continuation of a harmonious community over their personal interests. So it's integral in the Japanese culture. So it is still very common for you to see many houses in Japan, and there are multiple families living together. Part of it is practicality, because houses in Japan is very expensive. For you to buy a house, it's very expensive. So if your mom or your grandmother, if they own their own house, then it's just better to live there. It's also not customary for Japan, neither is it in the Philippines, to put your parents or your grandparents in a home. So they usually take care of their grandparents and their parents until it's time for them to go. And so they just live together in one house. Now, there's another dimension to it, and it's very common for you to find signs in Japanese public places that says, "Are you inconveniencing your neighbor?" or "Are you inconveniencing others?" And the idea is that you're very much a part of a community. So whatever it is that you do affects other, how you use your space, and what you give to the common spaces that others are using, that has a huge effect. And so you don't really, subway stations, public places, it's very quiet in Japan, because they believe that if you make a noise, that is going to affect other people. If you occupy too much space because you're moving too much, or you're very careless in what you do, you might end up using the space that is allotted for other people. There's that's why it's very clean. They don't just throw away trash, because they believe that there's that space where the trash is, that could be used for something else by other people. But at the same time, so that's their belief is that whatever it is that you do is also will affect other people. So as much as there is importance in connecting with your neighbors, there is also importance in giving them space. So that you're constantly trying to strike a balance between the two. Okay, but and then the other thing to that is there's the long-standing practice of always being there for your neighbors. If they need help, you always try to be there. But they try to put a lot of emphasis in the effort and not just the end result of it. So if you tried to help, but for some reason couldn't help, they will still recognize your effort to help just as much as they will recognize those that actually were able to help. So for example, you wanted to do a community pantry, for example, but you don't have much and you have very little in your community pantry. You will be just as appreciated as the one with the community pantry with overflowing supply. But because it's not really about the end result, but the effort that you put in. And that also has a translation internally. Your effort to be something or achieve something or do something is just as important as those who were actually able to achieve it. So if you're trying to win a medal, and you tried and you gave it your best but couldn't do it, but fell short by 1 second or whatever, you will be as appreciated as the one who was actually able to do it. So there's a very good phrase to that people utter if they want to express the appreciation for the effort. It's called yoku ganbari mashita. Yoku ganbari mashita. It's like, you did well. So it's not about, hey, you made a huge difference. It's about, hey, you did well. You did well because you tried and you gave it your best. There's another term for it. It's like it's ganbate. It's like keep going, keep it up, keep pushing, something like that. It's a way for them to encourage. So that's just 2 of the many countries in Asia. As I've said, I will try to go through I will keep on studying and go through all the countries and how and explain the dimensions of the sense of community. Just give me time. But it's really, really puzzling to me how there seems to be a current movement to have an impact. Like people, that's the reason why people don't want to just get any job. They always try to work on a company or do something that will matter or will make a difference or create an impact. In Asia, in many countries, not all, but in many countries, you're already born with a purpose. Your purpose is to love your family, your extended family, and your community. I think the end idea is that if you in Asia, there's a lot of emphasis to your close community. Look into that first before, and once all of them are taken care of, then you can look at more distant communities. It doesn't mean though that the responsibility rests on one person. It rests on everybody else. Will there be bad apples? Of course there will be, but it doesn't mean that just because there are 10 bad apples among 100 that you're just going to burn everything, right? So I think the end idea is that if you really want to make an impact, and you decide to fly halfway around the world, and you have 100 people within your close vicinity that actually need help, then that's just hypocrisy, right? So if just don't look further. Just look first within your close vicinity, and I assure you that there will be people that will need help. Okay, so I will discuss more as I learn more, but I hope that this contributed something, or that you learned something through this video. Thanks.